Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Source Material Comics Podcast. We have returned, and when I say we, it's me, Jesse Starcher, and that over there is Evan Bevins. And we have decided that we are going to continue the Blue and Gold saga right here on the Source Material Comics Podcast. So we covered the first volume of Booster Gold. This is volume 2 of Booster Gold. So let me try that again. The first trade of the second volume of Booster Gold. Okay, I'm doing good there. So we covered that a while back. Ladies and gentlemen, it was part of that whole podcast. We got to debut our first ever Source Material single. Plus, we got to talk about some great time travel adventures. Booster Gold going back in time to change an event that Rip Hunter said cannot be changed. And that was the death of Ted Kord, his best buddy, Blue Beetle. And he did it. And it was a great story. He got back, he stopped Maxwell Lord from killing him, and they're in the time stream now. So I was down, I was into it. I wanted to talk some more Booster Gold. So we are going to continue that tonight. So Evan Bevins, you're sitting over there being patient. Look, it's the second. I guess what we can do is kind of go back in case anybody missed the first episode. You were, if I remember correctly, you were picking this up off the shelf, right?
Yes, I think it ran for 49 issues. I think the last issue was 47, but as we'll talk about tonight, there were some interesting choices in the numbering.
Yes, indeed.
Which I approve of, unlike some subjective numbering that titles do nowadays. But yeah, I was buying it from the get-go. I was hooked with that first storyline. I think I pitched it to you as DC Superheroes Quantum Leap.
Right.
With Booster traveling through the time stream, striving to put right what originally went right and then went wrong. So it's not a one-to-one comparison.
Right.
But we saw him make sure Hal Jordan did become Green Lantern and inadvertently create the Sinestro Corps, outdrink Jonah Hex to save Superman's Earth father's ancestor, and then drunk drive a time sphere into the cosmic treadmill.
Yep. Rear-ending Barry Allen.
Yes, indeed, and leading to an important life lesson for young Wally West.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you don't drink and drive, Wally. Then we saw Booster try repeatedly and fail to save Batgirl from being shot by the Joker in The Killing Joke.
That's right.
Which Rip used to illustrate to Booster that some things in the past just can't be changed. So, no, Booster, you can't go save your best friend, except here comes the Blue Beetles of the past, present, and future to take Booster to do just that.
That's right. The Blue Beetles. We have Dan Garrett, we have Jaime Reyes, and then we have the Blue Beetle of the 25th century.
Something like that, yeah.
Well, a far future. We'll just put it that way.
Name is not important.
That's right. We don't know much of anything else other than he is a Blue Beetle from the very far future. So yeah, and he supposedly has a scarab or technology that will allow him to change the time stream or change events in the past, to which he uses to his advantage and saves Ted Kord. So,
which we should also note that if you weren't reading DC in the late 2000s, Ted Kord's death is what set into motion various storylines leading to Infinite Crisis, including the OMAC protocol, which was Max Lord's nanotechnology guardians fighting against superhumans. Max, being the magnanimous fella he is, just wanted humanity to control its destiny, which is neat considering he's a guy who can control people's minds with his special powers.
Yeah, a little contradictory there.
Max knows what's best for all of us.
Oh, I can't agree more. Yeah, that definitely changes some things, because now, which I thought apparently Max did not die, which I can't remember how where we ended things last time, if it was thought that he was dead or if he was just knocked out unconscious. I think he was unconscious.
Yeah, I don't think they were. And then if I remember correctly, the idea was that they would still get the information out so that Ted living would not be, because even though Ted died, that kind of set things in motion and exposed Max's plan early. But originally, they were trying to leave it unchanged.
Somehow, like saving Ted Kord, but leaving things unchanged as best as they could. Okay. All right. Well, that's going to take us to where we're going to begin here tonight. So we're going to cover the second volume. And according to what I looked up here, our second volume of Booster Gold is issue 0, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 1 million. So before I get into the synopsis here, which, by the way, again, let's give a credit to our creative team. Written by Jeff Johns and Jeff Katz. Pencil art by Dan Jurgens. Finished art by Norm Ratmond. Colors by Hi-Fi. Letters by Randy Gentile. So now we're starting off with this issue 0, and you teased me earlier with trying to hit me with some trivia and ask me why, and everything I guessed was wrong. So I need to know, why is there a why are we starting with issue 0 after apparently issue, what was it, 4?
6.
No, 6. Issue 6. So what's the deal here?
Well, Jesse, even though this isn't unspoken issues, you are a scholar of 90s comics, and you probably remember a whole lot of 0 issues.
Do I ever?
Even a few -1.
Thanks, Marvel.
But DC didn't just go with the occasional 0 issue. DC went with the whole event, 0 Hour.
0 Hour.
And every title that DC put out that month, and at 0 Hour, the original series counted down to 0. It either started with issue 3 or 4 and counted down to 0.
That's right.
And then every title DC put out, I guess it went in that period, every title DC was publishing had a 0 issue, I believe.
Yeah.
And if memory serves, I did not go to the interwebs to look this up. So if I recall correctly, the idea of these 0 issues wasn't just to tie into the main event, which of course was the primary focus, but 0 Hour was like the heir apparent to Crisis on Infinite Earths before DC just decided, you get a crisis and you get a crisis and crisis in the DMV and all this stuff. So 0 Hour was to clean up their continuity a little more, make Hawkman a little more confusing, but I believe the mandate was not only for it to serve the crossover, but to kind of really boil it down to the essence of who these characters were.
Okay. All right.
And so you'll get into the synopsis, but if you read this issue, it continues the story, but it also does seem it delves into Booster's past, why he is who he is, and sets up, or at least appears to set up, a new status quo with him and Ted Kord.
That's right.
And yes, 0 Hour, let's see, look on here, see when 0 Hour was released. But 0 Hour was definitely a product of the 90s.
I'm going to go with 95.
Let's see, 1994.
Okay, I had 10 to choose from.
So there was that. And then, as you mentioned, we also have a 1 million issue in here.
That's right.
Which DC Comics 1 million was an event in 1998 where all their comics had 1 million issues. Mm-hmm. And that one's always had a special place in my fandom and heart. I didn't read any of it when it was coming out, but my brother stumbled upon some 1 million issues at a comic show we were at, and he's like, I'm going to track these down. So I remember for Christmas that year, I was in college. I was down at a shop in Huntington, and I raided their back issue bins and got the original 1 million limited series and a ton of 1 million issues for him for Christmas that year. I still have a picture somewhere of his jaw dropping when he opened those. So if you're going to have a time-traveling superhero, why not make him part of crossovers long past, down to the issue numbers that were specific to those crossovers? I thought that was fantastic. I've grumbled on here before about, they do a crossover and then they have some limited series that doesn't even affect the main title. This is great.
Yeah.
Marvel's renumbering and legacy numbering and all that stuff gets confusing and all that. This is a fantastic.
It's definitely a way of kind of paying honor to what came before and using, it's a time travel comic. Why not?
Yeah.
And now that you said 0 Hour, when we get into the events of issue 0, like you said, It makes sense now as to what's going on, because there are some villains that they're going to run into where they're like, and I was like, I know what's going on here. So yeah, I agree. This is some good stuff. Jeff Johns is using this to the best of his ability. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's as close as you're going to get to the time traveling with Booster Gold.
All right. Well, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and get into the synopsis of these first 3 issues, and then we'll talk a few. Anything else anything left unsaid before I jump into that?
No, I think we're good. Fire up your time sphere and let's go.
Let's go. All right. So Ted Kord and Booster Gold together again, swirling through the time stream, and right now they're in a time sphere that's also got the other Blue Beetles in there along with him. Dan Garrett, the Beetle from Jaime Reyes, and then I've got the page here, trying to see if they explain which century he's from.
I think you were right. 25th sounds about right. He's from the future, and he doesn't want anybody to know a whole lot about it.
27th.
Oh, wow. There you go.
Yeah, so he is the Blue Beetle from the 27th century. All right. Their mission, as they know it right now, is repair the damaged time stream and thwart a monstrous future dominated by Mr. Mind's spawn. And to just kind of throw that out there, it was mentioned by the Beetle of the 27th century that they need to try to avoid a future where Mr. Mind's spawn has apparently taken over and has taken over the time stream. Now, as they strategize, they spot villains out in the time, just hanging out there in the time sphere, Parallax and Extant, and this triggers a fierce battle. So
the architects of 0 Hour.
That's exactly right. Parallax, do your best there, Evan. Explain who Parallax is, because somebody might not know.
Well, Parallax is Hal Jordan, who for many fans was Green Lantern until Coast City was destroyed in the Reign of the Supermen event, and he went a little crazy trying to repair it.
Mm-hmm.
That made way for Kyle Rayner to become the new Green Lantern, and for many fans to spend lots of time and even money trying to get DC to reverse that.
Yeah. All right, Extant. So you got to tell them who Extant is now.
Oh, man. He's Hank Hall of Hawk and Dove fame.
That's right.
And he messed with the time stream. I didn't ever read 0 Hour. It is on my shelf. I need to get around to reading that at some point. But yeah, he showed up in a JSA comic I read, and I have a hero click of him, and that's about it.
This feels like it's kind of DC trying to justify what happened in Armageddon 2001. Okay, Hawk, which a lot of people believe that whole thing was a flop. At the time, I didn't care. Me personally.
Rumor is he was not the original choice, but when it got leaked, they changed it.
Yeah. So something must have happened after that where DC was like, okay, we got to really make this dude a bad guy. And at some point he becomes Extant. He's involved, which is that Hawk in Armageddon 2001 is a bit different than Extant, of all people, who meddles with the time stream and has got all sorts of crazy ideas in regards to what they're going to do here. So either way, Parallax and Extant are teaming up. They're hanging out there in the time stream. And sure enough, Blue Beetle, all the Beetles, I should say, and Booster run into them, and there's a big battle that happens. At the end of the battle, the heroes are thrown into the 25th century, landing in a pivotal moment from Booster's past. Now, Booster, all of a sudden figuring things out, and he realizes that this is the time where he makes the decision to throw the game that basically gets him banned from football, if I remember correctly.
Right. The big game between Gotham University and Ohio State.
Ohio State.
Yeah.
But he also remembers, which I didn't know this was a character, but he also recalls that he needs to change something else. He needs to change the fate of his sister, Michelle, who I guess had come back in time.
Yeah.
She followed him. Okay.
Yeah, a few months after I went back in time, Michelle followed me.
All right.
Yeah. And she put on a costume and called herself Gold Star. I didn't know she existed before I read this.
This is not something like retro continuity or anything. That she was
not that I know of. But
I feel like
I've
heard of Gold Star before.
Booster Gold number 6 in 1986. So she was from the original run, which we should point out that the artist on this, Dan Jurgens, was one of the creators of Booster Gold.
That's right. So Gold Star was around back then, but she ends up dying. I don't know. Yes. I can't remember what they said, how she died, but at some point she died.
There was an explosion.
Okay. So she ends up dying, and Booster's like, okay, I've got to save my sister. I've got to figure out a way to, I don't know if he's planning on just changing this event and then that will save her, or if he's just like, no, I got to do this. I got to let the event go, but I got to save my sister in some way. Anyway, Booster and Ted decide to hatch a plan to find a replacement time sphere, because the one that they were in when it crashed into the 25th century, it got broke. So what they decide to do is take the very same time sphere that Booster took in his original origin story and fly around with it. And they're like, oh, we can bring this back to just the same. It won't be much of a problem. And they're going to go back. They're going to go back. And the plan is to try and save Michelle if they can. Now, the journey of them trying to find this replacement takes them to a museum where they attempt to steal the time sphere that I was talking about.
So only the museum where Booster was working, where he stole.
That's right. But they are ambushed, only to be confronted by some security bots, which, by the way, the security bots include one Skeets in there as well.
Yes, indeed.
In a thrilling escape, they manage to secure the time sphere and return to a present-day overrun by OMAC droids. Here's where our OMAC droids come in, controlled by the sinister Max Lord. So yes, Max is back in action. The heroes, using their wit and advanced technology, manage to disrupt the OMAC's operations temporarily. Their mission becomes increasingly perilous as they face relentless attacks and the grim reality of Max Lord's tyrannical control. Undeterred, Booster and Blue Beetle join a resistance group in London. They show up in the present, and to quote Doc Brown, the timeline skewed into this tangent at some point, and things are different. And the fact that it's being run by these OMAC droids and Brother Eye in the sky. So Booster and Blue Beetle have to find at least some place to hide out, and they end up finding a resistance group in London, where they also learn that Max has control of one Superman. As they plan to infiltrate Max's stronghold, they realize they must also free Superman from the mind control. Now, just to kind of throw this out here, the resistance group, it's Hawkman and Green Arrow who are trying to, I guess, secure some kind of resistance against Max Lord. To talk about what Max Lord is trying to do here, his idea is he wants to turn the world back for humanity, and in order to do this, he's trying to kill all the superheroes and supervillains out there, is my assumption.
Yes.
So a lot of heroes have been killed.
Yeah, we even get a Days of Future Past style image on the video screen of all the deceased heroes.
Yes. And I think at one point, one of the OMAC droids are reporting in that they've killed Kyle Rayner.
Yep.
And they've secured his power ring. So yeah, things are pretty bad, really bad. The resistance group, Hawkman, Green Arrow, who are constantly arguing. Then we have is it Panthra?
Pantha.
Pantha.
I think she was a Titan for a minute.
Okay. Wild Dog.
If you're like me, you might only recognize from Arrow.
Is he an Arrow?
Yeah. Yeah, oh, wow. He was a regular on Arrow for a while.
Okay. And then I feel like I'm missing a fifth member.
Oh, Anthro.
Okay, Anthro,
who I get mixed up with Mark from Teen Titans. Apparently, the DC universe is big enough for two caveman heroes.
Okay. All right. You're sitting there thinking like, oh, this resistance, and this is exactly what's going through Booster Gold and Beetle's heads. It's like, can't wait to see who else we got on the team. And it's like these three C-level people. They're just like holding on by the skin of their teeth. And I think they both look at each other and like, oh my gosh, we're dead. But as soon as they go back and they meet up with the rest of the resistance, Hawkman's like, okay, we need to go now. Everybody here let's go ahead and infiltrate.
He wants to go right then because Blue Beetle found that Max Lord used some Cord Industries tech to make the OMAC, so he found a way to blind them to the presence of the bug, his ship.
Right.
So they finally have a way into Max's stronghold.
And Hawkman's like, we got to go now. Let's do this. Let's infiltrate this stronghold. So they all hop into the bug and they head to the stronghold because once they get there. Now, what's interesting is you learn that Max has been trying to push Superman to kill other people. Even though he's got him under his control, he cannot get Superman to kill somebody. He can have him do just about anything else. He can have him capture him. He can go fight people, but he will not straight up kill somebody. As they plan to infiltrate Max's stronghold, they realize they must also free Superman from mind control. The climax sees the heroes battling through waves of OMACs, with Green Arrow and other allies making critical interventions. The situation turns dire when Green Arrow is transformed into an OMAC, which, by the way, it's a nanite virus that just takes and turns people into these androids. Green Arrow is turned into an OMAC. Wild Dog is tragically mind controlled to blow his own brains out. Then we have this showdown inside of Max's castle. In a desperate bid for survival, Booster and Ted use a mother box. So they happen to fall into this armory. And this armory has all of the technology that Max has acquired from killing all these superheroes, one of which is a mother box. And Ted knows just enough to open up a boom tube, and they escape through the boom tube, and they end up in an old JLI, Justice League International headquarters, where they regroup and strategize. With the time stream still in chaos, they understand the need to reassemble the old Justice League International now to counter Max's machinations. Who was it? I think it's Booster that comes up with the idea. It's like, we need to get an actual team together.
Yeah, he said we need somebody that we can already work with. We need people who know each other's moves inside and out. So they get their old team from the Bwahaha days of Justice League when Max Lord was the team spokesman. It's kind of been retconned that he was purposely undercutting them, putting lower tier people on the team and things like that. Before he was just an opportunistic jerk, now he's straight up evil. I get people not liking that and that kind of darkening some of those stories, but they make Max a good villain in this.
Their best bet is to get this old team back together, provided they are still around. And back in the day, I'm just going to stop real quick before I finish this last sentence. Were you reading some Justice League International?
No.
Okay.
I was strictly Marvel in those days. I kind of met Booster and Blue Beetle through the Overpower card game. The creative team from then, J.M. DeMatteis or DeMatteis, I can never pronounce his name. Love his comics, though. And Keith Giffen wrote it, and Kevin Maguire was the artist, and they reunited for a couple of 21st Century Limited series. I forget the order, but one was called formerly known as the Justice League. And then it was followed up with a story arc in JLA Classified, I believe it was called I Can't Believe It's Not the Justice League.
That's right. I remember you mentioning
that.
So
I became fond of them after the fact and went back and read some of them. But no, I was not familiar with most of them.
Yeah, neither was I. We have the members. I'm going to try to do this off the top of my head. We have Guy Gardner, Green Lantern.
Yeah.
Fire and Ice, Martian Manhunter.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm missing somebody. Obviously, Blue Beetle.
Booster and Blue Beetle.
Is there somebody else I'm missing? Mr. Miracle.
Mr. Miracle, Rocket Red.
Rocket Red?
Yeah, Soviet Iron Man, basically.
Okay.
He doesn't show up in the story, but he's in the picture that they're looking at the end of issue 8. And then Black Canary looking as 80s as possible. And Batman.
Batman, that's right. Batman. Okay. All right. So yes, their idea is like, okay, we're back here. We need to see if we can find the rest of the members of the JLI and try to put an end to Max's machinations. Now, side story time. Okay. Meanwhile, during all of this, who knows? It's time travel. Rip Hunter, Skeets, and Booster's ancestors, which are, oh my goodness, I had their names here. Help me, Evan. You remember off the top of your head?
I just saw him.
What was her name?
No.
It's not Levin. That's what I'm thinking.
Her last name. Oh, shoot. But they're his ancestors who have barely met. And Daniel
Carter.
Yeah, who masqueraded as Supernova during 52 for a while. And then, Rose Levin.
Rose, okay. All right.
There's a reporter who's trying to get a story on Booster Gold and is not thrilled to know that she's destined to have children with this nitwit Daniel.
Yeah, I think in our previous discussion, they had just met. She showed up on his doorstep, and then next thing she's whipped right into this thing. Rip's like, I need you too. And so she's kind of on. I think Rip tries to at least make her feel a little better by saying, okay, you're going to get your story. But yeah, she's definitely not too excited about, number one, the situation that she's in, plus finding out that she's supposedly going to be married to this nitwit. Meanwhile, Rip Hunter, Skeets, Booster's ancestors track the Black Beetle. So now we have a name for our 27th century Blue Beetle. At least I'm assuming. They don't really tell us, hey, this is the guy, but he looks darn similar.
It's him.
It's Booster's dad, I think, who calls him the Black Beetle. Booster's dad is dressed up as Supernova.
Back in sometime in dinosaur times.
Yeah. Well, anyway, they track the Black Beetle to Vanishing Point, which is, I guess, the point where time ends.
Yes.
Preparing for an epic battle against these time-manipulating villains. The stakes never have been higher as our heroes brace for a final confrontation to restore the timeline and save the world. Okay, so there we go. Essentially, we have Booster and Blue Beetle, who I think what ends up happening, I believe they end up sending... The Black Beetle goes back to his own time. Jaime goes to his time along with Dan. Dan goes to his time, but they are also... Their memories are wiped, right?
Yeah. Their memories are wiped because they say Ted's death was important to history. He can't let people know he's alive, so he's going to join Booster. That was the other thing we didn't get into in our synopsis, was that Rip told Booster he had to keep maintaining the image of this incompetent, self-centered hero so that no one would realize he was protecting the time stream. That's why Rip Hunter is not his real name, and he keeps his family and everything very secret so that someone can't go back in time and kill him as a baby.
Right.
As we saw happen to one rogue time traveler in the last storyline.
Yes, we did.
And so, yeah, that was Booster's cover, was to be the buffoon everybody thinks he is while he's out here saving all of history. And the way they set it up in the Zero issue is Ted was going to join him, but nobody could know Ted was alive.
Yeah, everybody had to be ignorant of the fact that Ted was Ted had survived. So yeah, they anybody who, well, I should say Dan and Jaime, they get their minds kind of wiped and they cannot remember that this had happened.
Everybody else goes back to when they're from. The Black Beetle goes and picks up Booster's dad in prehistory and takes him to Vanishing Point to meet. They call themselves the Time Stealers.
Right, the Time Stealers. Degaton, the Ultra Humanite, Supernova, Black Beetle, and I feel like there's a fifth one that I'm forgetting.
Yeah, and I just totally blanked on his name. My gosh, I know this guy's name. Despero. Okay. Yeah, before he hulked out.
Okay, all right. And at that point, they have made a decision to try and save Michelle. They end up coming back to the present. Things have all been changed. So we don't know. They definitely didn't get a chance to save Michelle as far as we could tell. They just came back to the present, and OMAC and Max Lord is running everything, and they are on the outs trying to find somebody to try and stand up and beat Max Lord, and that's where we kind of leave things. Are they going after the JLI? So what do you think of these first three issues, Evan? I'm throwing it to you. Ball's in your court, sir. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I really enjoyed it. Of course, when I read it initially, I thought they were setting it up like, okay, Booster and Blue Beetle are back, and the storyline where they killed off Ted was, it was pretty epic. It was a good send-off, but it was also a bummer because here was this character that for me was new to me and I really liked, and he made this tragic sacrifice. So I'm like, okay, cool. This fits right in. Blue Beetle and Booster will be defending the time stream. This is even better than Booster defending the time stream. And that's not quite how it's working out so far.
Right. We are smack dab into, some type of alternate history that's got to be changed. And it's not good. Because Max Lord has come out on top, it feels like.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to remember because there have been like 57 crises since then. But I was pretty into DC then, and this was a huge deal, this OMAC project. In the original story, Max did have Superman under his control, and a pretty infamous moment, Wonder Woman broke his neck.
That's Wonder Woman
killed Max because she saw no other way to keep him from controlling Superman.
Yeah.
And that put a strain on the already strained relationships of DC's heroes, and that was kind of a foundational thing. But the OMACs were a huge threat and playing into Infinite Crisis. So this came out maybe a year after that or thereabouts. So this was more of a product of its time. But right then, it was a huge deal.
It was an event.
Yeah, and we'd moved on, and it's like, nope, this is still a threat because they meddled with the time stream.
Right.
And notes and narration throughout these issues, he did exactly what his job is to prevent, which is people manipulating history for selfish reasons. It's a little harsh to call it selfish, but he's doing it to save his friend rather than preserve history.
Right. The OMAC robots are definitely a threat. You'd mentioned this is kind of a big deal. They've essentially taken over, or they can take over anybody who is just kind of unsuspecting. We watch Green Arrow get turned into one. They land at an old JLI headquarters before they land on the one in New York. I think it was possibly in London or somewhere around there in Europe. And they believe that one lady is trying to explain things and trying to help them. It was somebody that they had known in the past, but
yeah, I think it was a supporting character from the Justice League International or Europe days.
And she ends up turning into a robot shortly thereafter. And I remember Beetle's like, I knew it. And then they get promptly thrown through a wall. So yeah, we're picking up where this story kind of left off. He saved Blue Beetle, but the threat of Max Lord is not over yet.
It was a little dark for what I would expect, but not unnecessarily so. It manages to kind of thread the needle with these characters who are funny, but these dire circumstances in a serious story. So right. I thought they did that pretty well.
I love Wild Dog's look, by the way, which that guy, he must be really second tier, second or third tier.
I think putting him on the second tier is generous.
This guy is, okay, imagine the Punisher, but number one, strip away about, half his intelligence, and then also throw like a hockey mask on him. And then you might have Wild Dog. I think at one point during the battle in the fortress against Max Lord's soldiers, like he's just firing blindly, almost hitting his teammates at some point. I've never read a story with him.
He's actually the one that takes Bantha out.
Oh, that's right. And Maxwell Lord grabs a hold of him, and it's real easy to just.
Yeah. Or maybe Max got him to shoot Bantha.
I think Max did.
Yeah.
Regardless, he was still pretty reckless with his aim. Ollie and Hawkman, I don't know much about these characters. Have they never got along before? Because that's definitely
that's more history I've heard than seen. Although I know when Ollie came back from the dead, like it wasn't long before they were coming to blows. To simplify it, and I hate to put people in boxes, but basically Ollie's really liberal and Hawkman's really conservative.
Okay.
And so Hawkman's kind of a real law and order. Not that people who are liberal are against law and order, but Hawkman's kind of really hardcore, violent, hit him hard and fast.
He's definitely a hothead. And I think that when they go into the castle, like somebody's trying, I can't remember who's trying, it might have been Ollie's trying to talk him down, like, hey, you got to use some stealth here. We can't just straight up go in here and start, because Max will know we're here and immediately have the advantage. We have to be quiet. And it's kind of like they got to try and talk Hawkman down to like calm down, put some thought into this first.
Yeah. And then as quick as Ollie gets turned into an OMAC, Hawkman's gone.
He roasts Hawkman.
He blasts Hawkman, yeah.
Right. Hawkman's dead.
I mean, two pages and it's down to Booster and Blue Beetle again.
Mm-hmm. I love the beginning of this, like where we're kind of toying with time again. Like they take Booster into that and he's placed in that one moment where everything kind of changes for him. The time sphere getting broke, that's a big deal. We haven't really settled that yet. They just went back in time with the time sphere that they have.
And then they were going to bring back the time sphere that Booster took and just have Rip give him a ride. It's like picking up your car.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of
which how they described it, but yeah.
So we got a little bit of a problem on our hands if this time sphere doesn't get back there, because that was in my mind. I knew that was kind of in my mind. I was like, we're dancing around paradox territory and the time's ticking. That's not really addressed too much here in these first 3 issues, but trust me, it's going to come up in these next 3. All right. Well, if you're ready, man, I'll go ahead and jump into the synopsis of the next 3, unless you got anything else you want to say.
I'm
ready to go?
Good to go.
All right. Issue 9. Let me find it here. Maxwell, Lord, and Superman transport to the OMAC satellite, where Max has captured Kimio Hoshi, who is known as Dr. Light, and is now...
She was also in the League back then in the JLI days. She wasn't in that picture, so I forgot about that, but she was part of that era.
Okay. And his intent with her is he's going to drain her power to sustain the satellite. Meanwhile, Booster Gold and Ted Cord search for Batman, with Booster suffering waves of mysterious pain for some reason. Ted's mother box locates former JLI teammate Mr. Miracle, whom they rescue from captivity. In the snowy mountains of... Go ahead.
If you don't mind me throwing in this detail, he was being held captive at Belle Rev Prison, home of the Suicide Squad, which Max has turned into a prison just for Mr. Miracle, who is the ultimate escapist. So it's an entire prison of constantly evolving traps to try to keep him in.
In the snowy mountains of Norway, Green Lantern, Guy Gardner, and Fire ponder their next move against Maxwell Lord. Have to remember, this is alternate continuity. I know Guy loses the ring at some point, becomes Warrior. He hasn't lost the ring
at this point.
Okay, all right.
In the present, he's wielding the ring in Infinite Crisis, and this is around that time. So a full-fledged Green Lantern again.
All right. Green Lantern, Guy Gardner, and Fire ponder their next move against Maxwell Lord. When Booster and Ted finally join them, Fire explains they are awaiting Ice's return from seeking the Norse god's aid. Ice arrives with bad news. The gods refuse to help. Undeterred, the group sets off to rescue Martian Manhunter, finding him imprisoned in a massive contraption. Upon freeing him, they teleport to the OMAC satellite to confront Max. Their team works to disable the OMACs and release people from the nanovirus. During the battle, they free Dr. Light. A checkmate guard reveals himself as Batman, and he's quite annoyed that his covert mission has been exposed.
And he's in his Batman costume under the checkmate suit.
Of course, which I think that's something I've heard Billy talk about, I believe.
There was an issue of Brave and the Bold where Batman was sneaking into Gotham Police headquarters and he was in his full Batman costume, but he had a police jacket and a hat on.
Booster explains that Brother Eye, the system controlling the OMACs, is now sentient and must be destroyed. Booster heads to the control room and hits a large red button, I assume to shut everything down. Martian Manhunter engages in a mental duel with Maxwell Lord to free Superman, nearly overwhelmed until Dr. Light shows up and blasts a hole through Lord's chest. As Superman recovers, he reveals that Lord had forced him to watch Lois's murder. It's horrible. As Booster reels, trying to figure out how to fix the chaos, a portal opens, and out pop the Time Stealers. Supernova, Despero, Black Beetle, Ultrahumanite, and Degaton emerge. Meanwhile, at Vanishing Point, Rip Hunter and his team arrive to confront the villains, only to find them gone. Rip realizes with growing concerns that the villains are now steps ahead, plotting an unknown and undoubtedly dangerous scheme. Issue 10 rolls around, and at Rip Hunter's time lab, Rip, Rose, and Daniel grapple with a dire situation. The time sphere that Booster Gold originally used to come to the past is shattered. This threatens Booster's very existence, as without it, he will never be the hero he is destined to be. Skeets identifies Ultrahumanite as the culprit, who apparently had busted this thing, and Rip reveals that they only have an hour to return the time sphere to the 25th century and restore Ted Kord to his original fate. Yes, they have to try and get Ted Kord back into the past so he will face his original fate, according to this. In the far future of the 31st century, at the headquarters of the Legion of Superheroes, the Time Sphere appears, and Rip, Rose, and Daniel commandeer another Time Sphere. So, okay, let's get some Time Spheres and let's get this one back to the past. Somehow they got to get a Time Sphere back there so Booster will find it. But anyway, meanwhile, the Time Stealers, Supernova, Despero, Black Beetle, Ultrahumanite, and Degaton clash with Superman, Booster, Ted, Batman, Fire Ice, Guy Gardner, Martian Manhunter, and Mr. Miracle. Booster struggles to understand why his father, John Carter, disguised as Supernova, has allied with these villains. Maximilian, the evil counterpart to Skeets, Maximilian attempts to capture Ted, while Booster intermittently blinks out of existence. Erased from existence. That's what I was looking for. Skeets intervenes to save Ted, dousing Maximilian with some corrosive chemicals. John reveals to Booster that his time travels have caused numerous hero deaths, all to save Ted. So this is John telling Booster, look what you've done. What you have done has caused multiple heroes to die, all just to save your one friend. It's then uncovered that John is actually under the control of Mr. Mind, that little worm. In a dramatic moment, John releases thousands of Mr. Mind spawn, which swarm over Booster. Booster activates his force field and has Skeets emit a frequency disrupting Mr. Mind's control. As Mr. Mind tries to escape, Booster shoots his father's ear off, trying to kill the worm. Ted chases it down and crushes the worm-like villain underfoot, killing him. Despite the victory, Booster continues to fade. Ted rallies the team to escape, hoping Rip can save Booster. In a tragic turn, Black Beetle, during the fray, kills Fire with some type of an energy beam, leaving Ted dismayed. He contemplates sacrificing himself to reset the timeline. So things are creeping into his head like, I just need to go back and I need to get killed because this is getting bad. Heading for the Time Stealers' time sphere, Ted aims to return to the past to be killed by Maxwell Lord. Black Beetle intervenes, though, and says, no, you must live so that Jaime does not become the Blue Beetle, and therefore somebody significant to the Black Beetle doesn't die. All right. Now, in this chaos, as they're going into this time sphere, Black Beetle ends up losing the scarab that gives him his powers in the middle of things. And as the time sphere vanishes, Booster gets one last look at his friend before he fades away. And then I think things fade to white at the end of that issue. And then we get our next final issue is issue 1,000,000. Booster Gold and Skeets are swept into a time storm, rematerializing in the year 1,000,000. They meet Peter Platinum, a local hero, annoyed by their interference with his recent escapades. I mean, I guess that works.
No buts about it.
his recent accolades. Skeets identifies Peter's suit as containing time travel tech that could be their ticket home. However, Peter starts getting into a verbal kind of I wouldn't say confrontation, but starts talking to Booster a little bit. Peter, inspired by Booster's financial gains as a superhero, worries that Booster showed up to claim a percentage of his profits.
Basically he's saying that Booster had the right idea, but he wasn't smart enough to pull off the con.
Right, and that is kind of like what Peter Platinum is all about here. Well, Rip Hunter suddenly appears, urging Booster to get into the time sphere. He explains that Ted Kord has returned to the moment Maxwell Lord killed him, thus restoring the timeline. Frustrated by Rip's insistence that time cannot be changed, Booster hops into the time sphere and then promptly quits thereafter. The next day in Las Vegas, Booster and Skeets address a disturbance involving the Royal Flush Gang. With Green Arrow and Green Lantern's help, they defeat the gang. Batman then summons Booster to the Batcave. Expecting a reprimand, Booster has instead shown photos of the night he tried to stop the Joker from paralyzing Barbara Gordon. Booster recounts his failed attempt and laments over Ted's fate. Batman, offering sympathy, encourages Booster to persevere. With renewed determination, Booster returns to Rip, ready to rejoin the mission. In Rip's time lab, Booster is shocked to find his sister, Michelle, is alive. Rip explains he rescued her just before her death, knowing she could motivate Booster to stay committed to their mission to correct the timeline. Booster and Michelle take a time sphere for a brief respite in Paris, 1889. As they leave, Rip quietly says, "Keep it up, Dad." Oh, look out there. In the epilogue, a shadowy figure uses the lost Black Beetle scarab to infiltrate a technology lab at Kord Industries, hinting at future challenges. All right, there it is, Evan. I did it. Long form synopsis for all 3 issues. What do you got to say here, man?
Well, these are some of my favorite moments in the series. I forgot the 1 million issue came this soon. I remember Peter Platinum.
Right.
So Ted Kord's sacrifice was already heroic, and then he went back and did it again.
Yep.
And knowing what was coming, it still was hard to read because all this stuff is happening in Booster. He doesn't want all these bad things to happen because he saved his friend. So he's like, I can do it. Ted says, no, this is what I've got to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that was excellent. Bringing Mr. Mind back really was kind of a callback to 52 when Booster officially leveled up, so to speak. I love the idea of Rip and Booster's ancestors robbing Brainiac to get the ring in the time sphere where they needed to be.
Yes.
And then one of my favorite moments in the series is where Batman calls in Booster and says, look, I saw what I don't know what you're doing, but I know what you tried to do. And I know you didn't give up. And Batman, who needs to know everything, understands there's a reason Booster can't tell him. And so when you get Batman's seal of approval, that's pretty good.
That's a big deal. And that's what a lot of what Booster we saw in the first volume, what we talked about, the last show that we talked about. Booster is trying to find some type of acceptance. Now, if you look at him, he's brash, he's bold, he's out there, and this guy is trying to get all this media attention, but he also just wants to be accepted. And we saw him try to he was all excited because he was going to join the Justice League, and it kind of fell through. Some crazy stuff had happened, but at the end of it, he was offered the opportunity to go there. So here, same thing. He just cannot find a place to fit in, and it seems like he gets down on himself. And he's just like, oh, geez, I can't do this anymore. But it takes somebody that he respects. There's a lot of father issues being worked out through this book, really. When you look at it, he's got a dad who was not a good father figure at all. He was the one that talked him in to throwing this game. So he's a
good dude even before the megalomaniacal caterpillar started controlling his mind.
Right. So Booster hasn't had a good father figure, and you can see that he's just like continually looking for some type of somebody to kind of step in and say, okay, man, it's all right. You're doing good. Just keep doing what you're doing, and what you're doing is important. He never had that with his dad. And then Batman definitely comes in here and does that. And he's just like immediately with renewed vigor. He's like, okay, I'm ready. I mean, he quits. He tells Rip he quits, and I don't know how long time passes. Obviously, long enough for him to go to Vegas and fight the Royal Flush Gang. But shortly thereafter, as soon as Batman says, dude, this is what you're doing it matters. He's like, okay, it does matter. And he's back at it again. But yeah, I feel like the character of Booster is just somebody that's going through. He's got a lot of stuff on the outside of him that makes him look like he's bold and brash, but on the inside, he's just wanting to be accepted, and he needs that fatherly guidance every once in a while to get him back on the right track.
He feels like he was a joke for a long time. Now he's trying to be more, and he's messing up. He feels like he is what people think of him as. And Batman says, hey, let the world think you're crazy if that's what it takes to be the best you can be, Michael. You proved me wrong, and you proved yourself wrong. And then he says, if you ever need somebody to talk to me. And so that Booster's like, okay, somebody believes in me. I'm not a loser. Batman says you're not a loser. Pretty good endorsement.
I agree. Man, we get our issue 9. We get our big battle. I think one of the big moments that stood out for me in issue 9 is when they go to rescue Martian Manhunter. And he's whatever that thing is. I have no idea what it is, but there's like a bunch of people that's connected to this massive thing.
Something that showed up in Infinite Crisis, I think.
Well, I assume it's using his powers, or at least keeping the superhero subdued in some way.
Yeah.
But they take him off of there, or wake him up, and he immediately, like, I can't remember who woke him up, but he like grabs their throat. He's like,
Mr. Miracle.
That was Mr. Miracle. He's like, where's Max? He wants blood. He is enraged with what's going on there. And I assume this probably ties into some crazy, horrible stuff that he did. He's clearly enraged and upset with something that Max has done. Obviously, let's try this again, because the fact that he's killed so many superheroes probably puts him up there as like, okay, I'm going to kill Max Lord. So, but anyway, he wants blood. That kind of stood out to me, watching him with so much fire and so much rage grab a hold of Mr. Miracle's throat and be like, where's Max at? That was pretty crazy. Mm-hmm. I love the possibility of a paradox and erasing Booster from existence. That kind of puts things in a rush. I didn't know what was going on at first, because the way that they play it is Booster goes to like tackle his dad, and his dad blinks out of existence, which makes sense. And then Booster starts doing it a little bit more.
I don't know if his dad blinked out of existence. He might have I think the supernova suit can go intangible.
Okay, well, if that's the case.
I thought the same thing you did. I was looking at it, I'm like, wait, why is his dad blinking out? Because that's one thing his dad said was like, yeah, we can stop him from becoming a hero, but don't stop me from living.
Okay. Well,
so yeah, but that was confusing. But I believe that's one of the things the supernova armor can do.
All right. I thought that it was causing a paradox and it was going to affect him. Of course, it would probably cause a paradox for everybody there. So everybody should have been blinking out of existence. It's good to see Superman back on track. And we have a big battle with the JLI finally back together again and fighting the Time Stealers. We get to see Maximilian, who gets drowned by some corrosive acid or whatever that Skeets was like, yeah, I might not be able to beat you, but robots rust. And then he drops a bunch of stuff on him. Mr. Mind coming back. That was pretty cool. Definitely pretty cool.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. Fire getting killed by Black Beetle. That was definitely a big deal. Peter Platinum. So are we going to see more of Peter Platinum?
I was just wondering about that. That's the only place I ever saw him. So
okay. All right.
Spoiler alert. He doesn't show. I don't think he shows up again. Now, I don't believe he shows up again.
Oh, come on. This was like, I don't know how you throw this guy in there. I love how Rip is like, Peter Platinum, disgusting. Yeah. And he leaves. So Rip is obviously not impressed.
Yeah, looks like this is the only place he appeared.
What? That blows my mind, because I think I've read a couple of the million issues from back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Really, this is, as far as like calling it a 1 million issue, Booster shows up in the year 1 million, and then Rip Hunter promptly grabs him and says, no, come on, let's leave. Within like, I don't know, 5 pages, the million issue, it doesn't take place fully in the year 1 million.
They let him use the time travel number convention. I am
not going to complain. I'm just saying that if Peter Platinum doesn't show up, it kind of
sounds like when you were saying there wasn't enough Christmas in the Sleepwalker Christmas special. Enough 1 million in Booster Gold 1 million.
Yeah, dude. But you throw Peter Platinum in there and you're like, oh, this guy's got to show back up at some point, right? Guess not. All right, well, let's talk about the big elephant in the room, and that's the final words of Rip Hunter at the end of issue 1 million. So am I right here? The Booster is Rip's dad?
Yes.
Wow. What a revelation. Did we know this before? We didn't, did we?
We did not.
Okay, thank goodness.
They did make a big emphasis, and it didn't seem that out of place because you're learning about being a time master, training Booster to do it. So they kept making a big deal about how Rip Hunter wasn't his real name and nobody knew where he came from or whatever. And I don't think I was suspecting that he was part of the family.
Right. Well, it makes sense now as to why he's obviously involved in what Booster's doing and trying to make sure that everything goes off without a hitch for his ancestors as well, Rose and Daniel. So that's pretty cool. And then, of course, we got Michelle. Michelle's back. Kind of strange because that didn't happen in these 3 issues.
Well, it did. Booster asked him, well, how could you do that? And Rip says, well, I figured even though she died in the past, she's from the future, so maybe there was a loophole. Even more simple than that is just that Michelle's death didn't, not that it wasn't important, but it didn't set in motion all these events. Her death wasn't a pivotal moment in history or whatever, like with when Ted didn't die, it stopped a lot of things from happening and allowed Max to gain a foothold and all this, whereas Michelle's death didn't alter history, so to speak. Or her living didn't alter history. So
bringing her from the moment of her death into the present. All right, well, what are you? Any other thoughts here on the last 3?
And this was again another great volume. This to me was really kind of the peak, but like I said, I kept with the series for 4 years, and I think this was kind of John's swan song on it. I'm blanking on the name. There was a guy that came in and did a couple issues. I think he wrote issue 13 and 14, or just kind of like a fill-in. Rick Remender. I don't know why I couldn't think of his name, but yeah, Rick Remender did a little bit. Yeah, here we go. 49 issues. They never did quite get back onto the Guardian of the Time Stream thing, or at least not the way they set it up. I still thoroughly enjoyed the series. It just never quite got back to what I thought it would be. And then Dan Jurgens eventually started writing and drawing it. So we did see him team up with Elongated Man, who was dead at the time. That's one of the things hinted at on these last few pages, some of which, at least 2 of those came to pass. He did team up with Elongated Man. There was a part where Michelle posed as Batgirl. I'm not sure about the others. So you had Dan Jurgens writing it for a while. And then eventually Keith Giffen came on, who wrote a lot of Booster and Blue Beetle in Justice League International.
Okay.
So you always had guys who really knew and understood the character. I loved what Jeff Johns did with these first 12 issues. Like I said, that might be the high point of the series to me, but it was after that you had Dan Jurgens that created him, and then Keith Giffen that helped really define who he was, and J.M. DeMatteis, they both co-wrote it for a while. So the whole time it was just people who really knew and appreciated the character. I absolutely loved it. I was totally bummed when it ended after Flashpoint and the New 52, even though they had a Justice League International book where Booster was kind of like the central character, but it just wasn't the same. And then at some point, the previous Booster showed up, like kind of lost in the time stream. But forget what happened, but that never really paid off, and he just kind of went back to being goofy time travel Booster.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. Hey, I'm digging this. I'm having a good time. So Michelle's Gold Star is back. We have this shadowy figure who showed up at Ted Cord Industries or Cord Industries. Don't know exactly what. I have my theories. I haven't read forward, but I have a feeling I think I know who has this scarab that Black Beetle dropped, and I think I know kind of what's going on. But
I'm trying to clearly I have forgotten some of this. I'm trying to remember. There was I was thinking Remender wrote it, but it's not popping up in here.
That's what I was going to say.
There's a story at some point where they were traveling in time. The one where I think Michelle ends up impersonating Batgirl is they go back in time and somehow Killer Moth has become the Batman of like, the Gotham villains are in trouble. They send up the Moth signal.
I remember you talking about that.
So, yeah, a lot of weird time travel stuff, sure. But, yeah, I really enjoyed the series because, like I said, even though the premise veered a little, I didn't even talk about Dan Jurgens' art. Dan Jurgens' art is comic book art to me. I mean,
100%.
Maybe he's not quite in George Perez's class, as if anybody is, but nothing wrong with the Image guys. I love their style, but when I think about what comic books, like when I just imagine comic book, I see George Perez, Dan Jurgens, like that.
Right.
Just that perfect balance of it's realistic, but not hyper realistic. It's exaggerated, but not just completely crazy, just the right balance. And that's so you got Dan Jurgens writing it, drawing it, and then DeMatteis and Giffen is just, they kept Booster funny but relatable and heroic, and really changing around. I was just, not that good stuff didn't follow, but it just kind of bummed that we lost that version of Booster. We got Ted Cord back at some point when they were just like, yeah, continuity, schmontinuity. We talked a couple years ago about Heroes in Crisis, where they kind of got back together, but man, it just, undoing both of Ted's sacrifices, I don't know, that just kind of takes something away from him too. I almost feel like.
I hear you.
I was glad to see Booster and Blue Beetle back. They did do a series a couple years ago called Blue and Gold. I think Dan Jurgens wrote that one too, and that was fun, but it just wasn't quite the same as the Booster we got in this series.
Are we going to do volume 3? Or are you?
I'm up for it. Absolutely.
All right. So at some point in the future, you can hear us move forward with the next volume as we continue with the adventures of at least Booster Gold. Blue Beetle come back? I don't know. We'll have to find out.
Well, we will see some more of Michelle. She sticks around, and Rip Hunter is a part of it.
Okay.
Yeah. And there was a spinoff series too called Time Masters that was about when Batman was dead. It was Rip Hunter, Booster, Superman, and Green Lantern looking for Batman in the time stream.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Ah, neat. All right, man. Well, we did it. Let's go ahead and we'll get into plugs here. So what do you got going on over at Asterisk 51?
Well, I'm getting close to the end of the first run of Amalgam Comics, of actually scanning and sizing pictures while we were finishing up there. Got Dr. Strange Fate and X Patrol to finish off the first round. Then hopefully they'll be posted by the time this comes out. In some of my shopping excursions to Dollar Tree, found some movies that tie right in with the 2024 Olympics, as you might expect.
Wow.
Got that. And for people who don't like politics in their bargain movie bins, I'm sorry, I do have a special Republican National Convention installment of hashtag Dollar Tree Cinema featuring Smokey and the Bandit 2. Not a stretch at all. Yes, going to be looking through some. I've had a few posts about things from this year's Free Comic Book Day. Going to get back into some of the older ones, but try to do every other Friday, hashtag Free Comic Friday. Just seeing which ones work and which ones maybe don't work so well.
All right. Well, as for myself, listen, folks, you're most likely listening to this podcast on the Source Material Comics feed, where we have some great shows. You're listening to Source Material, where we talk about comics of any era. We're at over 300 and some episodes here on Source Material, and so there's plenty out there in the archive to go check out. I'd tell you, absolutely check out Volume 1 of Booster Gold. It's in the archive. You can check that out. 90s Comics, we do them right here on the Unspoken Issues podcast, right here on the Source Material Comics feed. 90s Comics, we talk 90s comics. We have a good time doing it. It's me, it's Dean Compton, it's Derry, it's Evan, it's Chris. Matthew Price comes on there every once in a while. We have a great time. Recently, I don't think it's aired yet, but it's either going to air or aired recently. We had a discussion on a book called Enemy Ace War Idol. And you talk about a powerful book. So that was me, Dean, and Derry who discussed that. We mentioned it already earlier in this episode. You could check us out talking about Aztec #1 and some superhero crossovers. Marvel, DC throwing some superheroes together from each of their respective companies to either do battle or team up. Check that out. That's out there as well. And we can't forget Snap Material, where me and Evan talk about Marvel Snap, that mobile game. That is insane. All right, folks, we're out of here. That's Evan. I'm Jesse. Thanks for joining us. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
You can